Week 15 on the NFL calendar typically marks fantasy playoffs, and some good news for managers out there. Breece Hall looks good and is expected to play, coming back from a knee injury, missing last week's game against Miami. Let's welcome in Heath Cummings from Fantasy Football Today. Heath, I said it was good news, but what do I know? You're the expert. We bring you on here. So how do you view the Breece Hall news as far as it pertains to fantasy managers?
It's certainly better news because we were looking at Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen as high-end flex plays without Breece Hall. Assuming this report's correct, and on Sunday morning he feels good, he's in the lineup, we'll view Breece Hall as a number 2 running back with a whole lot of upside. The talent is undeniable. The fact that he has this knee ailment and he's not been particularly good in the last month does give you a little bit of reason for concern, but he's facing Jacksonville, who's given up the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs this season. It's most likely, if Breece Hall is healthy, he's starting for you.
Elsewhere in running back news, Kenneth Walker now considered doubtful for Sunday Night Football. What's your advice for managers out there not sure what to do here?
So this is probably better news also because Zach Charbonnet without Ken Walker is better for fantasy managers than if they're both there and we don't know who's going to get which touches. So if Ken Walker's out, you view Zach Charbonnet as a no doubt about it top 10 fantasy running back. You're starting him over almost everyone. The blow-up game happened last week, but this wasn't something new. It's been at least 16 fantasy points in every game that Ken Walker has missed. Start Zach Charbonnet.
See, that's my simple brain saying, oh, somebody coming back from injury, that's positive. Leaving due to injury, that's negative, but that's why we bring you on. Meanwhile, let's talk about this game. Dalton Kincaid is expected to play, but what do you expect his usage to look like?
You know, I'm not even sure if the usage is it's the big question with Dalton Kincaid is, does he score a touchdown?
Yeah.
Because even when he's had 7, 8, 9 targets in a game, his efficiency over his first 2 years in the league has been so bad in terms of turning targets into fantasy points that he still hasn't been a must-start guy. He's been one of the biggest disappointments of the season at tight end. And still, it's tight end, and so he's a low-end, borderline type starter. I'd rather have some 12 guys or one guy that I'd like to start this week, but he's not a bad option if you don't have a top 12 tight end.
All right, you can watch that game on CBS, and our friends from NFL Today will be in Detroit for Bills at Lions. Elsewhere in some fantasy questions, Bucky Irving is questionable against the Chargers. What do we do?
It's pretty simple. We're gonna hopefully you have both of them, and if you do, then if Bucky plays, you start him as a borderline number 1 running back. Okay. If Bucky's out, then Rachaad White's even better than that, up in that Zach Charbonnet range. This is a fantastic situation in terms of running back volume. Irving's been the much more efficient rusher this year than has White, but it's kind of the similar situation to Seattle. If one of those guys is out, the other one gets more work. And the other thing I'll say is, if Bucky Irving is out, I'd maybe try to add Sean Tucker to the end of my bench. He is someone who's been extremely efficient as a rusher and as a pass catcher so far this season. And if Rachaad White were to suffer an injury early in that game, there's no telling how many points Sean Tucker could score.
Well, speaking of one player being out means more work for others. George Pickens is out for Week 15, so what does that do to the rest of the Steelers' options?
You know, I wish there was another wide receiver in Pittsburgh that we could count on. I'm sure Russell Wilson does as well. Yeah. I think what it means is you can't trust Russell Wilson because we saw Scott Miller, Mike Williams, and Calvin Austin all see a 16.7% target share in their one game without George Pickens. That's just not enough. You're hoping for one of those moon balls to turn into a touchdown. With no teams on a bye, we don't really need to start a guy like that. Pat Freiermuth's the one guy, especially in the red zone, who might see a little bit more action. He's behind Dalton Kincaid, but he is a fine option as a number 2 tight end.
All right, finally, Derek Carr is out for Week 15, which means it is the Jake Haener show. I want to know the trickle-down effect here. How does this affect a guy like Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, that's the one that matters, right? Because all their wide receivers already got hurt. Taysom Hill's already been hurt. Alvin Kamara hasn't scored in a month and a half. But still, if you're in a full PPR league, he's a no doubt about it top 10 option because you can expect he's going to see 5 or 6 targets no matter who the quarterback is. He gets a little bit trickier if you're in non-PPR. I'd still start him in half PPR as a number 2. Non-PPR is where you get a little bit nervous because we did say Kendre Miller in his first game back last week had double-digit rushes attempts and scored the rushing touchdown instead of Kamara. He's a must start in full PPR, a little bit more worrisome otherwise.
I love it. You're helping out all the leagues out there. PPR, non-PPR, half PPR. We appreciate you chiming in with your expertise. Heath Cummings, you can check him out more on FFT. Come on, this is the place to be for all of your burning questions as it pertains to fantasy. The playoffs are here, so make sure you can watch the podcast by scanning the QR code or listen wherever you get your podcasts.